and therefore is a leader globally in terms of crude oil imports. Also, the country is the largest consumer of natural gas in the world. About 11% of its natural gas in 2010 was supplied by imports, primarily from Canada. In 2007, United States imported 707 MTOE of energy and exported only 188 MTOE. The country was self-sufficient in energy until late 1950s, when energy consumption began to outpace the domestic production. By 2007, net energy imports accounted for 22.4% of all energy consumed. At the same time, 84% of imported energy was in form of oil. While the United States consumed vast quantities of energy, as mentioned, it has also pledged to cut its greenhouse gas emission by 2050. This was done through the passage of American Clean Energy and Security Act in 2009. This measure aims to promote clean energy investment to lower U.S. greenhouse gas emission by more than 8% by 2050. And this figure shows the major primary energy sources in residential sector that we focus today. The main part comes from natural gas and also electricity, and the other sources are petroleum and renewable energies. But as you see, natural gas and electricity have the main shares. In this study, we consider various independent variables like residential, cost of residential heating oil, cost of residential natural gas, cost of electricity, median household income, household size, gross domestic product GDP, and also the population, resident population. And these red lines are historical data, and the trend line added is the forecasting scenario for these parameters, independent parameters. And as you see, some of them have linear growth or decline, but some of them has quadratic form. Like most of the energy costs have a quadratic form of growth. And the aim is to forecast the residential sector energy consumption for the next 20 years. In multiple linear regression models, we select an appropriate set of regressors from a set that quite likely include all of the important variables. However, we are not sure that all of these candidate regressors are necessary to adequately model the historical data of energy demand. In such a situation, we are interested in screening the candidate variables to obtain the regression model that contains the best subset of regressors. In addition, to make the model easy to use, we would like the model to use as few regressor variables as possible. In this approach, it requires fitting of all regression equations involving one candidate variable, all the regression equations involving two regressors, and so on and so forth. Then these equations are evaluated according to some suitable criteria to select the best regression model. Since there are 7 candidate regressors, as I introduced them, there are 2 to the power of 7 total equations to be examined. A number of criteria may be used for evaluating and comparing the different regression models obtained. A commonly used criteria is based on the coefficient of multiple determination shown with R squared P. Regressors are usually chosen so that MSEP is a minimum, and then third criteria is the CP statistics that contains the summary of CP statistics, which is a measure of total mean square error of the regression model. This table contains the summary of the best models among all possible models. For example, in the first column here, as you see, this is the best result of among the models which contain one regressor. This is the best result among the models which contain two regressors, and so on. So I tabulated them, and the best regression models are based on 2, 3, and 4 independent variables. Adding more independent variables, for example, in this column, 5, 6, and 7, adding more independent variable only increases the calculation time and makes the model too complicated. While the criteria is not improving that much. Up to here, the criteria is improving, and beyond that, the criteria is not. R²P is not improving anymore, while the model is getting more and more complicated. So I think these three subsets are the best models for doing the estimation. And now the table shows the selected independent parameters for the model. In the next step, based on the historical trend of the parameters, the future trend of the independent variables are forecasted. For example, in the model 1, we have these two independent variables, GDP and cost of electricity. The second row shows the model 2 with 3 regressors, GDP, household income, and residential electricity. And model 3 with 4 regressors, GDP, income, electricity, and the cost of heating oil. The selected variables, the selected regression models take the future trend of the independent variables as input to generate the estimated energy demand in next 20 years. This figure presents the estimated energy demand in residential sector of the United States based on the forecast of selected independent variables using best regression models. Now, the other method that I've used is artificial neural networks. A neural network is a massively parallel distributed processor made up of simple processing units. It resembles the brain in two respects. First, knowledge is acquired by the network from its environment through a learning process, and the interneuron connection strength, known as synaptic weights, are used to store the acquired knowledge. For modeling the problem using artificial neural network, a feed-forward multi-layer perceptron neural network has been used, which is coupled with backpropagation technique. The network consists of a set of sensory units that constitute an input layer, one hidden layer of computation nodes, and an output layer of computation nodes. The input signal propagates through the network in the forward direction on a layer one by layer basis. And these are the steps of the analysis. First, we divide the available data into training and predicting set. Select a proper architecture and input parameters, then train the model using the training set, then evaluate the model using the criteria explained. For different architectures and input parameters, we repeat the steps 2 to 4, and when we got the best model, we apply the test on the final network architecture. In the estimation of energy demand of residential sector, 3 models are built. Each of these three contains a set of independent variables, which are same independent variables as ones used in multiple linear regression model. And this figure shows the output of the model for the period of 1984 to 2010 compared with known energy demand in the same period. So this dotted line is the known historical data, and other dashed lines are model 1, 2, and 3. And as you see, they have predicted the known data very well, so we can use these three to evaluate the future. Using the forecast of individual variables, the energy demand has been forecasted for the period of 2010 through 2030. The models which have been developed by and trained by the historical data points and performances during the test period are now used to generate the future demand of energy. Forecast values of individual variables are fed to the trained network as input vectors. The models give the future energy demand by applying the weights which are set up after the training process. As can be seen in the figure, the noticeable decrease took place in the GDP per capita in the median and the median household income during 2007 until 2010. This happened due to the great variation in economic growth during the period of economic downturn. Therefore, because of the nature of artificial neural network modeling, these fluctuations are reflected in the model in its future prediction. In addition, the result of artificial neural network models are in agreement with the predicted results for the growth of energy demand in the residential sector published in International Energy Outlook in 2011. And here is the evaluation of the models. Results presented in this table indicate that R squared of the models are not significantly different, and all of the models are generating energy demand data corresponding to the test period of models are generating energy demand that is close to real data. However, in terms of prediction, the trends of models are different. Although the results from regression models show a decrease in different slopes corresponding to different models for energy demand in near future, the results of artificial neural network express no significant change in demand in the same time frame. And since the regression models only see the overall long-term trend, they're not sensitive to recent fluctuations. Being more sensitive to the outcome of the economic crisis, it sounds that approximately uniform results with slower growth predicted by artificial neural networks are more realistic. And about the results, actually the artificial neural network is a black box method. It's difficult to explain the way we forecast of the result, but I can explain them in these three reasons. Home appliance makers may spend more money on research in order to progress to more environmentally friendly and fuel-efficient product. Due to growing cost of energy, people modify their behavior and use energy more efficient, and the development of education and improvement of public awareness about restricted energy sources decrease the energy demand. And for future work, although the small increase in energy demand in the residential sector of the United States has been estimated by neural network, the United States should keep trying to reduce energy consumption in order to reduce CO2 emission and meet its national and international commitments. So the future work can be on the emission reduction. And also, due to uncertainty in any extrapolation technique, more research should be done to closely observe the accuracy of the models developed in this study. And that's all I have.
John Morris. John Morris is a PhD student from the Department of Civil and Building Engineering at Loughborough University in England. He's affiliated with the 4M Project, a consortium of 4 universities in the UK, Loughborough, De Montfort, Newcastle, and Sheffield, which aims to calculate the carbon footprint of the city of Leicester. His research is focused on residential energy consumption, specifically on local government energy reduction policies and the support available, financial and data, to local authorities to meet government targets. John has a bachelor's degree in geography with economics and a master's degree in international financial and political relations, both from Loughborough University. His research interests include energy efficiency, sustainable cities, government policy, data analysis, and statistical modeling. Today I'll be presenting on meeting energy reduction demands, identifying energy inefficiency in the English domestic sector.
Good morning. My talk today is mainly focusing on the role that local government in England can play in reducing residential energy demands. So just a quick outline. I'll begin with the background behind the policy context currently in operation in the UK and what's about to come into effect next month. Then I'll discuss the methodology I've used in my study, which is primarily revolves around interviewing local councils and presenting them with statistical results. I'll look at the data limitations of the data I've got and go through how I've actually identified inefficient housing in England by generating an expected level of energy consumption in a year. And then I will talk about the feedback I got from the local authorities when I then went back with some of my results, and then finally some conclusions and plans for the future. So the background, in 2008 the UK government legally bound itself to reduce its CO2 emissions by 80% relative to 1990 levels. And the residential sector currently accounts for 30% of total UK CO2 emissions and 25% of overall energy consumption in the country. And there's a wide knowledge of technical measures that can be used to improve energy efficiency, both of electrical appliances used in the home and also the actual house itself in the way that it retains heat. And there's been a big promotion of energy efficiency. Next month the government's about to release a new policy, which is where householders can take out loans which meet the upfront costs of improving the insulation measures in their house, but rather than the individual having to pay off this loan until it's paid, it's secured against the house. So if they sell the house, whoever then buys that house is responsible for making the payments. But the problem at the moment lies in the implementation and who is actually supposed to be promoting these schemes, whether it's supposed to be national government, local government, or individual communities and individuals. So a methodology, I conducted interviews with 11 local councils in England from a mixture of cities, small towns and rural areas. I developed 2 multiple regression models, one for gas consumption, which is a primary fuel for heating houses, and one for electricity consumption, and I used nationally available data sets looking at an average of 700 homes based on postcode areas and the type of house. I then used these regression models to generate what you would expect the annual energy consumption to be given its locally specific factors, and then I got some feedback from local councils once I'd done this. So there's been an emphasis placed on local government in England. They're sort of seen as being able to better promote these schemes to their local communities and get the communities involved. But at the moment they've just experienced a 25% reduction in their budgets, and energy is quite a low priority at the moment. We're prefer to focus on education and health and transport. And there's also a lack of data, especially at individual household level, which is why I'm using this average of 700 homes. And some local authorities, especially in the city areas and the London authorities, have a lot more resources and are able to collect their own data, whereas some of the more rural areas don't have that. And there's a large variation in energy demand across the country. And part of what I got from carrying out these interviews with the local authorities is they're not really sure on what role they're supposed to be playing in this. They've been given a lot of government schemes but no guidance on how to actually do anything with them. All of the local authorities were concerned about the data that was available, its quality, and also how it could be used. And really they felt that the best way for them to identify areas of energy efficiency was to have something that was consistent across the whole country, rather than each individual area collecting their own data using different methodologies. And so, having consulted the councils, I was able to get some nationally available data from the UK Department of Energy and Climate Change, who have the average annual energy consumption for gas and electricity at these areas of 700 houses, and there's an average that you can get for those. And also I've used census data looking at the size of the house, which I've given by the average number of rooms, the average income, and then I've got heating degree days, which looks at the external air temperature, and then also how many houses in the area are connected to the national gas grid. And so from these regression models, for my gas consumption, I've got the R-squared of 0.64, and for electricity, R-squared of 0.73. And then the predicted variables that I've got from these models are then what we say is the expected consumption in a year, given the locally specific factors. And then how I've used this result is I've taken the actual recorded statistics and divided it by the expected consumption, and then multiplied it by 100. And so you see a figure of 100 is that area is consuming the amount of energy you'd expect. If it's greater than 100, then it's consuming more, and so that would indicate potentially inefficient, and that should probably be an area that should be targeted. And if it's less than 100, then it's consuming less than expected, and we'd say that this is an energy efficient area. So this is for the city of Leicester, which is what my project focuses on. And so these areas in red sort of indicate, this is for gas, so they sort of indicate poor quality housing that needs insulation, because these areas are using more gas consumption to heat their homes than would otherwise be expected. And so the next phase of my work was then to go back to the local authorities that helped me in the preliminary phase of my work. 5 of them agreed to have a follow-up session, and I generated these maps for each of those 5, and I could talk to the relevant people that worked in the organisations to get their views on whether the results were sensible, whether they were usable, and if they had any data that they'd collected which could back up or contradict what I'd found. All of them agreed that this LSOAs, which are the 700 houses, were suitable because, well, there's no other data that's available at a smaller resolution. They agreed that the use of a multiple regression model was sensible because not everyone's got statistical backgrounds, especially, and in local councils it's quite rare to have someone that would be able to interpret results from something a bit more technical. And all the data sources were approved because they're widely available, they're produced by the government or they're used by the government. All of them saw the benefits of practical application and could see the links to government policies that aim to introduce energy efficiency in housing. But also all the local authorities focused a lot more on the gas figures, which relate to the efficiency of the housing stock rather than the electricity, which they felt doing anything about electricity consumption would be too much interference in people's lives. There were too many factors on why electricity consumption varies, and so they preferred the gas, which was more, they could do something about it by trying to encourage people to insulate their homes. And so here's just some quotes that I've got. So they're looking at targeting these areas, 700 houses, and getting financing to actually improve the energy the insulation levels. This is from a council where the residents weren't really interested in energy efficiency, and so the councils were also not that bothered, but they're hoping that by showing these results they might actually think, okay, we need to do something about this. Again, this Green Deal, which is taking out the loan and securing it against the house, and a lot of the problems were not being able to identify where people were that would possibly be best served by these schemes. And again, this is from another council that had whose residents weren't really receptive to the energy efficiency programme. So for my future work, all the results that I've done are based on 2010 because that's the most recent year that the data was available for. So I'm looking at extending the methodology to track changes over time. The data is available from 2008 and the government are committed to releasing it every year for further years beyond 2010. And then also looking at how this can be applied beyond England into an international setting across Europe, North America, and possibly in Asia as well. And so my conclusions, there was a lack of knowledge on how local authorities can use energy consumption data to feed in with their energy efficiency policies. And so what I looked at is how to create a new methodology which has practical use for local authorities. And then I've managed to get approval that this was a sensible route to take.
Okay, I'd like to open it for questions now for any of our presenters.
I have a few questions for the first presentation. So if I remember correctly, you find income has a negative impact on the BMT and price has a positive one. Yeah, my guess is because I think your sample, first of all, the income, you include all the rural central census tracts, right, outside the metropolitan area.
Yeah, that's the whole state.
Yeah, so basically in rural places, people's income, the household income are lower, but they are far away from many different destinations, so they have to drive further away. And including all these rural samples might bias the relationship between the income and BMT driven.
Yeah.
So my guess is if you focus only census tracts in the metropolitan area, it might give you more reasonable relation between income and
That's right, and to the extent that self-selection is an issue, that people are choosing where to live based on various things that are related with
their willingness to drive,
Absolutely, right,
yes.
and willingness to travel, right? It
Yeah.
may be that higher income people are more able to choose to live in places that are closer to all the things that they want to go, and so that's why they drive less.
Yeah.
But another next step that I want to take is I should be able to identify which vehicles belong to which households. And so I think having household BMT to go with the household income will let me tease out whether it's this story that you're telling or whether it's just a substitution across vehicles for the same household instead.
Yeah, if you can get match of the DMV data with the census data, that would be very nice.
I've got that. And on the gas price, I've got my leading kind of theory on the gas price story is something similar. I've got a map. I don't put it up. But if you look at gas prices across the state of California and why they're different, a lot of it has to do with transport costs. And so places that are farther from oil refineries have higher gas prices. And all of the refineries are located in either the Bay Area or Los Angeles. And so the same places that are far away from the major refineries are the same places that are farther away from all of the other points of interest. And so there's definitely a correlation going on.
Yeah, in rural places in California, the gas price is usually higher than in metropolitan areas.
Yeah.
That's weird, especially if you go west of Los Angeles metropolitan area, the gas price just keep going until you hit like Las Vegas probably. And in the middle of, in between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, that's probably the highest price, gas price you can find in the nation. And also for the price elasticity of driving or VMT, I'm not sure if you controlled for the household level wealth. I know you controlled for the income, but wealth is often missing, variable in many models. Actually, there are a few papers in Journal of Urban Economics. I think one of them by Raphael at UCLA. They talk about if you're missing the household wealth, you are experiencing the endogeneity problem because the household wealth, if you have more wealth, usually you live in areas that the gas price are higher as well because gas station they have to pay like land rent and the gas price are higher in locations where housing prices are higher as well. And these people are richer basically because they have more household wealth and so they tend to drive more. It's not anymore the price itself is driving the BMT.
That's right.
It's actually the wealth.
It's it's no variable problem. And I don't think that my cross section is the best strategy. To
Yeah,
identify
time series might be.
elasticity. But I really like, if I wanted to get at that, I want to use the panel that I want to develop.
Yeah.
So, and try to identify it off the time series instead.
Yeah.
So I can use fixed effects, wipe out all those well impacts.
That would be a better strategy.
Question here?
Yeah, I have a kind of an opposite observation to that. I just read an article about the fact that the higher the income, the more likely to live in the urban area, like you said, they're living in the wealthiest areas. I don't know what that income cutoff is, but that they drive less. So because they are moved to, like you said,
Yeah.
they fly more. Fly more. So the total energy use is higher because they have cars, or they drive less, they just use the school time, and the daytime. And so I was going to suggest that actually including the very high income levels of BMT might skew it in a different way from what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think both of these stories are totally plausible and totally possible, and I'm hoping that the data that I have is going to be able to start to tease out some of these stories. And I think making sure I control for the right variables, and it might also be, I might need to shrink down my scale and talk about things on more of a local level, and identify individual local places. But to the extent that other energy use is also changing, I'm not going to have any household electricity consumption or flying expenditures or anything like that. So those types of substitutions are going to be hard. But it's a totally valid point.
Especially in Europe, they've seen that effect as well.
Yeah, and the selection issue comes up very frequently in the literature, and I'm hoping I need to pull in more socioeconomic variables in the census. Right now, I've only really got income. I want to pull in the age and all sorts of other characteristics to try to control for that as much as I can.
Did you say that map was Zoom?
What do you mean Zoom?
Your map that you had is like zip code?
Yeah.
That you wanted to spend the whole.
Yeah. I can show you pictures of just the Bay Area. I can crop it. I can go look at it any of those ones.
I also had a question from the first presenter. Since the study is using 2005 data, how do you take into account resident migration as well as the exchange of vehicles?
Yeah, so the fact that it's 2005 was a practical move because of the small jet regulations. If I tried to use more recent years, I'd be missing all of the newer vehicles, which is going to be the result. But to your point, I'm hoping that to the extent, migration is a definite issue, and the panel, if I have a time series of 2005 or 2000 through 2005, then I can start to look at trends like that. Actually, census will have information about migration. That's a good point. I'm hoping that my data is aggregated enough that it's gonna minimize the impacts of any of those things, or at least balance them out in aggregate. But I haven't thought about migration very much. That's a good point.
To the first presenter, I was just trying to recollect your correlation with walking use and something. It has positive.
Yeah, it does.
What is how come I couldn't understand that then, so I thought let me.
It's a good question, and it shows up in the Bay Area. It doesn't show up in LA. Nobody walks in LA. I don't know. You could start to think of some stories for people who walk more, are more active, and they like to go do more things. So they get in their car and drive to places where they can go walk and hike. I can speculate. A lot, but that surprised me as well. The simple message from it would be that people are not substituting walking for driving. To the extent that you improve walkability, you're maybe not reducing BMT as much because they're just not substitutes. But that's something that deserves more attention.
And maybe driving to walk.
Yeah, and I don't know, those modal trade-offs there's a big literature on that I could probably look at a little bit more to try to explain that. That's
May
where the
not, right,
issues are,
right,
yeah.
so people, sure, they walk a lot, and just like you said, they go to the Sierras every weekend, or they go up into Humboldt County or whatever every weekend, so they put a mile in their cars during 48 hours, and the rest of the time they walk around.
It's very possible.
But about so the first couple questions were about wealth and income,
Mhm.
and I'm assuming, well, so if we're trying to do demand reduction, we're probably not gonna put a lot of effort into making people either richer or poorer. We might develop marketing things that are aimed at more wealthy people or something like that, but, so go ahead, and so I would think, oh, well, that's a less important, whatever the terminology is to use, you know, less
Right.
important thing we want to think about more. What are the things that groups of people, communities of people can have influence on, like land use planning, how you're zoning, whether or not you're putting in public transportation? So go ahead and talk about how you kind of see this playing out.
Absolutely. So income was not one of my policy instruments. I'm hoping to. I mean, it's a control, right?
Yeah.
So it's letting me identify some of those other policy instruments. And I think, I mean, the Bay Area, the big result in the Bay Area is that public transit and biking opportunities do seem to make a big difference in terms of reducing VMT and reducing fuel consumption. And so that's been shown to work there. In LA, actually, I wish I had this map in my presentation, but if you look at fuel economy in LA, fuel economy in LA is really good. Everybody in LA is driving very small fuel efficient vehicles. They're just driving them really, really far. And so, to the extent that local communities can get involved in that, I think there's less of an opportunity for fuel economy standards. That's kind of a national thing. The evidence I've seen so far from land use planning suggests that improving kind of urban design, and well, here, another interesting variable that I didn't talk about was I've got a percentage of houses in the zip code that were built after 1980. So this is kind of like this is the new age housing developments that are, not gridded outside of the suburbs, significantly increases VMT. So thinking about how you design streets and how you mix, instead of separating all of your housing, how you bring back in mixed use could have an impact.
Smart.
Yeah, I have
Sorry,
Yes,
that's your time.
a question for you as well. To what extent are you taking into account age? Have you done any analysis to examine how an aging population, different age groups use transportation, and how an aging population would factor into predictions of what?
Yeah, so age is one of the variables in the census that I haven't pulled in yet, and I need to. That's next on my list of things to do. My suspicion is that it's going to be, age is going to be correlated with kind of the rural-urban sort of split. You're going to see older populations in more rural areas and younger populations in more urban areas. So, but at the same time, older people are, older populations are not going to be as active or mobile or driving maybe as far. So I can see the rural aspect of that pushing older populations to drive more, but the lifestyle aspect may be going the other way. So in net, I don't know which of those effects.
I think you want to look
Yeah.
carefully, because I think that you might find that retired age people all of a sudden become really active and they're doing
Oh.
things. And what made me think of age is the difference between income and wealth, because
Yeah.
certain age groups don't have income anymore. What they're getting is not considered income, but they have wealth.
And to the extent that I need to find a good wealth measure or a good proxy for it, that's not as readily available as that's a really good point.
I have a question for the speaker. When you said the lack of knowledge by the local authority of how to use energy consumption data, is the local authority the same as what we did with called utility? Do they provide?
It's the local government that are responsible for running the services.
Okay, so you're not going back to the electricity or
No,
gas
it's-
provider?
No, they provide the gas and electricity companies provide the data to the government, who then provide to local councils.
Because here in San Diego, where I come from, California, we have the project where we're trying to work with the local utility, which is a monopoly. They're very interested to work with quite sure why they're interested, but they are interested. And I'm afraid there's a conflict there, because they might be interested to increase the energy use for their profit. But, okay.
So I think that's why the national government want local government to implement them, because if the energy companies were doing it, people would be a bit suspicious of why an energy company is telling you to improve the energy efficiency of your house. So,
Actually, can I jump? So SDG&E is interested in, so that, I mean, they're probably not, I mean, because of California's decoupling, they're probably not interested in it to sell more.
Up to a point, yes, they are, because they still, it's up to a point decoupled.
Oh. That's tough.
And it's one of the two.
Let me have one. Then I'll let you go, but I can guarantee for others. For the first presentation as well. So in terms of the policy implication, so you have the VMT based on the home address, basically.
Yeah.
But you don't know where this VMT has been spent.
That's right.
So basically, you don't know where they went to. So I think maybe the question that maybe more of policy implication is that you know where they go to. So basically, where the traffic is they adding to. So maybe these people in suburban areas, they just go into downtown or central city more. So that's why they have longer VMT for their cars, even if they live in suburban areas or rural areas. And they are adding the traffic into the central city rather than adding traffic in the suburban area or rural area. And also in central city, maybe because when they have traffic congestion and they stop and go, that probably gives more emission than in rural areas. So not just based on VMT.
That's right. And so to the extent, I mean, with my data, the data that I have, you're right, I cannot track where these vehicles are going. That's kind of the big disadvantage to the aggregated data, where it's the big positive to the survey data approach. So I mean, I've got some other variables. I just got like a week ago some other variables about job information, where jobs are located. But again, I mean, it's all aggregated. So in terms of tracking individual vehicles, that's going to be really hard for me, and that's really hard for. I haven't really come across a study where they've actually tried to measure vehicles and track them with GPS and try to do. I know some people at the Plug-in Hybrid Center in Davis have actually done that, just from an electric vehicle usage type of research study, how far they're going and where exactly they're going. And to your point about the emissions at finer timescales, that's I'm also just aggregating. It's going to be an average emissions level, and I recognize that your emissions depend on your acceleration rate or how fast you're going or what year you're in, and so those micro impacts I'm not going to be able to pick up. But I'm hoping that the aggregate and the average for a given area still has some importance in terms of if you're a policy planner, you should be interested in aggregate type of stuff.
In fact, in initial presentation, you mentioned the difference between, like, instead of going for the personal interview survey data, you went for this type of data. Now you mentioned how there are two different, like, for the specific. Why? I thought it could be complemented. Like, in the future, if you get some personal interviews, sample survey, something, and then it would then address some of the issues.
Yeah. I'd love to do a survey.
Somebody else can also do something.
So a question for our second presenter. So made some notes here. On the graph that showed the three models and the predicted usage in the future, there was a big variation around year 2015, another big variation around the year 2030. So I wonder if you could speak to that. But then you also mentioned that you thought some of the reasons why the line was so wavy might be related to a change in behavior related to utility rates. And I was wondering at what point do you think that would happen? Like how high would the rates have to be for that change to happen? When would the models suggest?
Those changes, those decline in the energy consumption, as you mentioned, higher cost of the fuel for residential sector, including natural gas and heating oil, and also the cost of electricity. As you can see in the forecasting scenario for the independent parameters, the prices, they're going quadratic. They have quadratic trend, so they're going really high, while the other things are going linearly. So that's why, especially in the last 5-10 years of the forecast, we have a significant drop in the energy demand for residential sector. And about how high the price should be to have the decline. At this point, I don't have idea about that. It should be, it's related to some other things like the income of the people and other things that may happen during the time, the forecast period. So at this level, it's not possible to say, okay, if the price of electricity is this much, then people care about it. Then it's not possible at this level. It's a fact. It's a function of other parameters.
Yeah, just because you mentioned it in the models, I wonder if the three different models address it differently, changing behaviors for the homeowners and changing behaviors for manufacturers as well, if they would be doing things differently. Would that affect the three models differently? So, because there was some variation in the three models,
Yeah.
but you said the reason for the wavy line over time could be because of a change in behavior of the homeowner, a change in prices, but also a change in what manufacturers are doing. Right, that's the reason for the wavy line. But between the three models, would that impact the three models differently?
The nature of the waviness of the results is not because of the reflection of the homeowners or the manufacturers, but the total trend, which is being uniform or a decline, is because of those attitudes of the people, manufacturers, and the homeowners. And the wavy nature of the results is, as I told you, is because of the black box neural network.
Okay.
Can I follow up on the models? You did the modeling based on market